Getting a little vitamin D here. It's going to burn. Temps are going to drop like a rock tonight. There ain't a cloud in the sky. Ah.
They raised the judge's recommendation as significant, but argued that Illinois law allows the state's election board to make the ballot decision. Erickson says the board doesn't have the authority to vet candidates based on federal constitutional considerations.
The Illinois Board of Elections is split between 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans. The former judge recommended the board dismiss the case against Trump.
A key border deal negotiated with Republicans to reject it.
Democratic Senator Chris Murphy, a key negotiator on a possible border deal, said on Sunday that text of a border compromise could be ready to go to the Senate floor as soon as this week.
We do have a bipartisan deal. We're finishing the text now.
The deal would give the president a shut the border between ports of entry when illegal crossings reach high levels. Also, reforming the asylum system to resolve cases in a shorter time frame and expediting work permits. President Biden has said he would sign it right now.
If that bill were the law today, I'd shut it right now.
Right.
Control would unlock
Past
Republican
3.5
support for
years.
Ukraine aid. Earlier, Republican senators had insisted that border policy changes should be a prerequisite to Biden's $110 billion emergency request for funding Ukraine and Israel.
The consequence of failure here is not just that we keep immigration as an open issue available for Donald Trump to exploit in the next election. It is also that Ukraine loses this war.
Former President Trump has come out in opposition to the bill. He said there could be no compromises on illegal immigration.
What
Called
about all
the
the
deal
money they
betrayal
fucking
of America.
lost?
He said that if Biden wants to secure the border, he has the power to do it without a bill. Trump also said that passing the bill now would be, quote, another gift to the radical left Democrats.
A lot of the senators are trying to say respectfully they're blaming it on me. I said, that's okay. Please blame it on me. Please. Because they were getting ready to pass a very bad bill.
House Speaker Mike Johnson warned in a letter last week that the deal would be dead on arrival.
House Republicans Sunday
Year and illegal immigration is a top issue among voters.
That's a great question because I think that Democrats now, the pressure is on them. The American people are demanding border security, which border security means national security. It means public safety. It's a lot more than just illegal immigration. It's having a great economic impact on a lot of small towns and counties across our nation. And so I think the Democrats are feeling the pressure that they must comply at what the American people are asking for. And that's where the negotiation is stalling right now, because it doesn't help that even some on the Republican side are siding with the Democrats, and that's where the struggle is.
On Tuesday, the Homeland Security Committee plans to debate impeachment charges against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. Do you think impeachment is the right avenue? One could argue Mayorkas is just doing his job and carrying out the policy of the Biden administration.
You can say that, but in my opinion, this is a dereliction of his duty. Ignoring immigration law, ignoring asylum criteria, ignoring child endangerment and human trafficking laws is not just following the orders. You have a responsibility to the American people to defend its borders.
allegations say the cabinet secretary committed high crimes and misdemeanors. The first article charges Mayorkas with willful and systemic refusal to comply with the law.
House Republicans allege that Mayorkas breached the public trust for his handling of the southern border amid record numbers of illegal immigrants.
The Homeland Security Committee will meet Tuesday to mark up the articles. The articles are expected to be sent to the full House for a vote. If the House votes to impeach Mayorkas, he could then go on trial in the Senate for potential removal.
The top Democrat on the committee, Representative Benny Thompson, pushed back against the accusations, saying the articles lack clear charges and evidence. For more analysis on these developments, I spoke with Victor Avila, former special agent with Homeland Security Investigations. He's also the author of Agent Under Fire. Victor, break down the border deals being looked at in the House and the Senate and how, if passed, they would impact the flow of illegal immigrants coming across the U.S.-Mexico border.
Absolutely. That's the biggest struggle that we're dealing with right now, because, people have been asking for Congress to do something. The problem here is what's in these bills and the wording and the once you get into the woods as to what we actually need, and we don't have an agreement because some of the information in some of these bills are not not accomplished what we want to accomplish, and that's securing the border. A lot of it has to comes down to the money that is being spent. Now, the Democrats want $14 billion to send down to the border, and you would think, well, that'd be a good thing. The problem is it's not $14 billion to support in securing the border. It's $14 billion to continue the flow of people and allowing them to come into the country. And that's the issue, the number one issue that we have with this bill now.
Thank you for explaining that. Now, what about the Republican side? What do they want on the table?
It's two simple things, and these are policies, by the way. It's actually not even the law. To go back to remain in Mexico, to have the people that are coming into the country to remain in that, not only in their home country, but stay in Mexico while we conduct that asylum review. And that right then and there would probably solve the issue that we're seeing. The second issue is to end the catch and release, because under this administration, the policy has been that if you come and seek asylum, that we're going to allow you, catch you, and then release you into the country and give you a future date, which we know that 9 out of 10 people that are coming under this asylum criteria do not qualify for it, but they're still allowed to come in here, and sometimes given a date 5, 7, up to 10 years from now, and then we will not have the ability to track them.
Victor, do you think Democrats are more
thousands of the nation's wealthiest people to news outlets?
Charles Littlejohn pleaded guilty in October to 1 count of unauthorized disclosures of income tax returns. In addition to a sentence, he'll have to pay a $5,000 fine.
The judge described Littlejohn's actions of targeting the sitting U.S. president as an attack on constitutional democracy.
Littlejohn, in his brief statement, said he acted out of a sincere but misguided belief that he was serving the public.
And House Republicans Sunday released 2 articles of impeachment against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. The allegations say the cabinet secretary committed high crimes and misdemeanors. The first article charges Mayorkas with willful and systemic refusal to comply with the law.
House Republicans allege in the second article that Mayorkas has breached the public trust for his handling of the southern border amid record numbers of illegal immigrants.
The Homeland Security Committee will meet Tuesday to mark up the articles. The articles are expected to be sent to the full House for a vote. If the House votes to impeach Mayorkas, he could then go on trial in the Senate for potential removal.
The top Democrat on the committee, Representative Benny Thompson, pushed back against the accusations, saying the articles lack clear charges and evidence.
And Hunter Biden's former business partner telling Congress that members of the Biden family were not paid by China until after the Obama administration ended. Hunter Biden and his associates started working with CEFC in 2015. That's a Chinese firm linked to the ruling Communist Party. Rob Walker is Hunter's former business partner. He says payments for the work didn't start flowing until after the Obama administration ended.
House Republicans say the closed-door testimony confirmed that Hunter's work with the Chinese company began while his father was still vice president, but that the Bidens held off on being paid until Joe Biden left office.
Walker also said that Hunter always made sure there was a clear boundary between any business and his father. Democrats say this confirms that President Biden was not involved in the business dealings. And in related news, House Republicans are reportedly set to hear testimony from multiple witnesses this week. That's in their ongoing impeachment inquiry into President Biden.
Hunter Biden's former business partner, Eric Schwerin, is scheduled to testify on Tuesday. That's after House Republicans subpoenaed him last year. Records show Schwerin had access to bank accounts relevant to the probe.
On Wednesday, Joey Langston is scheduled to testify. The House Oversight Committee says Langston paid about $200,000 to Joe Biden's brother and sister-in-law while he was still vice president. House Republicans say they want to know what these payments were about.
The biotech company 23andMe is facing a class action lawsuit. The suit accuses the genetic testing company of failing to notify customers whose personal information was collected into lists that were sold on the dark web. The suit also accuses 23andMe of failing to protect customers with Chinese and Jewish heritage, which were apparently specifically targeted. The suit was filed after the company notified the California Attorney General's office that it was hacked from late April 2023 through September 2023. That was before 23andMe became aware of the breach.
And a convicted child murderer in California is set to be released on parole. That's despite the prosecutor saying at the time of his conviction that he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. Patrick Goodman killed his girlfriend's 3-year-old son, Elijah Sanderson, in San Francisco in 2000. He was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison in 2002 for the crime.
The San Francisco medical examiner at the time reportedly said it was the most severe case of child abuse he'd ever encountered.
The California Board of Parole hearings approved Goodman's release in December, saying he does not currently pose an unreasonable risk to public safety. That's after denying his request for at least 3 years.
Governor Gavin Newsom has the authority to overrule the parole board's decision, and his office said the case will be reviewed carefully. In 2022, Governor Newsom reversed 21 parole approvals for murder.
Coming up to $40 million stolen by Ukraine's defense officials in an arms deal. What we know about the massive corruption scheme as the investigation unfolds.
U.S. Biden had said Iran-backed radical groups in the region were responsible for the attack, though a particular group has not been pinpointed. This was the first time U.S. military personnel were killed in the Middle East since the start of the Israel-Hamas war.
Kirby stressed that the Biden administration doesn't want a wider war with Iran, but added the U.S. will do what it needs to protect itself.
Iran, meanwhile, trying to fend off speculations that they were behind the attack, the regime's intelligence minister said militant groups make their own decisions.
And Austria is joining the list of countries to pause funding of the United Nations Agency for Palestinian Refugees. This following allegations by Israel that employees of the agency took part in the October 7th Hamas terrorist attacks.
At least half of the agency's top 20 government donors have now suspended funding.
The United Nations Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA, on Friday opened an investigation into some of its employees based on information provided by Israel. Israel alleged that 12 of the agency's 13,000 staff in Gaza were involved in the October 7th attacks where Hamas terrorists killed 1,200 and abducted hundreds more. The UN on Sunday confirmed that 9 of those 12 staff members had been fired.
An urgent and comprehensive independent review of UNRWA will be conducted, as it has been announced by Philippe Lazzarini, the Commissioner General of UNRWA. Any employee of UNRWA who is involved in acts of terror will be held accountable, including through criminal prosecution.
Several countries, including UNRWA's main donor, the United States, swiftly paused their funding to the organization. Criminal prosecution of UN staff members would be a rare move, since they normally enjoy functional immunity. This means they cannot be taken to court for anything they have said or done as part of their duties. Prosecuting them would mean that Israel's allegations against them are accurate. The White House welcomed the investigation.
As Secretary Blinken made clear in his call with the Secretary General yesterday, we expect that will be a complete and thorough and transparent investigation.
Israel has long criticized UNRWA, saying the agency has been supporting Hamas for years. It's an allegation UNRWA denies.
The UN is not only weaponized to delegitimize our existence, but also to physically exterminate us.
UNRWA was established by the UN General Assembly in 1949 to provide assistance and protection to Palestinian refugees across the region. In 2023, the agency reported that it had received over $700 million in funding. Many of Gaza's 2.3 million people have become reliant on the aid UNRWA provides.
UNRWA is our lifeline. Who will give us food and drink after the war? May God help the people. What can I say?
While stressing the serious nature of the allegations, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres urged countries to reconsider suspending their funding.
The European Union is
holds a strategically important location in Jordan, where the country's borders meet Syria and Iraq. The base includes logistics support, and there are roughly 350 Army and Air Force troops stationed there. Former NATO Allied Supreme Commander Wesley Clark says the strike aimed to demonstrate America's powerlessness.
To make us look weak, to show that we're incapable of defending ourselves.
Former President Trump issued a statement saying, "This brazen attack on the United States is yet another horrific and tragic consequence of Joe Biden's weakness and surrender." Presidential candidate Nikki Haley called the attack shameful and led a prayer for families who lost loved ones.
We need to lift up every one of those families who lost their loved ones and every one of those families whose loved ones have been injured.
This is the first time U.S. troops have died at enemy hands in the region since the war in Gaza started. Biden says the U.S. knows it was carried out by radical Iran-backed militant groups operating in Syria and Iraq. Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin says he's outraged and deeply saddened by the deaths and injuries of U.S. service members. But Senator Lindsey Graham criticized the defense secretary, saying Austin's efforts to deter aggression against U.S. forces in the region have failed miserably. And the Republican senator called for retaliation, saying, "Hit Iran now, hit them." A sentiment echoed by Senator John Cornyn, who wrote on X, "Target Tehran." Journalist Tucker Carlson mocked the pair of senators, sharing a screenshot of their calls for war, calling them lunatics. Senator Tom Cotton issued a statement criticizing the Biden administration, saying Biden left U.S. troops as sitting ducks and called for devastating military retaliation against Iran's terrorist forces. Iran's mission to the United Nations said in a statement on Monday that Tehran was not involved in the attack. Retired Lieutenant General Mark Hertling called for caution in any rush to action against Iran.
You got to remember that Iran is connected to not only Russia, but also China and other nations.
The Islamic Resistance in Iraq, an umbrella organization of hardline Iran-backed factions, claimed attacks on 3 bases, including one on the Jordan-Syria border. It's unclear if they're responsible for the deaths of the 3 U.S. troops. The attack is likely to fan fears of wider conflict in the Middle East. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Are asking them to agree to an audit to be carried out by independent experts that would be selected by the Commission.
The EU is one of the biggest donors of UNRWA, but the Union was not scheduled to provide more funding to the agency before the end of February.
The EU said their audit will be broader than the UNRWA's own audit. They said it would focus in particular on how UNRWA controls its activities and in order to ensure that its staff are not involved in terrorist activities.
The EU also said that all UNRWA staff should be reviewed to make sure that they did not participate in the attacks.
At least 6 countries said they will continue to fund UNRWA, among them Ireland, Luxembourg, and Spain, which are EU member states.
And here to discuss these allegations, we're joined by Middle East Affairs analyst with the Center for Security Policy, David Wormser. David, welcome. How do you assess the potential impact of these allegations against UNRWA on the U.S.'s relationship with the UN and on international trust in the agency?
Well, thank you, Stephanie. Well, I think this is potentially a death knell for the organization. The United States, I don't think, can re-enter funding for UNRWA anytime soon. Congress would step in if the administration even decided to resume. But I think this is the tip of the iceberg. I think you're going to start seeing more and more allegations come out. The Israelis are already suggesting they have information that 1,200 staffers were involved in terrorist activities of some sort. And that is beyond all the activity that we saw with Hamas allowing their schools to become arsenals and launch sites, namely the passive, turn your eye the other way type support for Hamas that UNRWA did over all these years, including using UNRWA ambulances for logistics supply of terrorists and movement of terrorists. So I think this is going to get worse, not better for UNRWA.
Right, so you're pointing to a kind of allegations as well of complicity by UNRWA with these activities. So do you think there's anything that can be done to right this situation for that particular agency?
No, for that particular agency, I doubt it. There's also serious philosophical issues that will come up. For example, there's a global UN agency for refugees that deals with every other refugee elsewhere in the world. And then the Palestinians have their own agency, unique. There's no other nation or group of refugees that has it. And Hamas or the Palestinians through this agency are getting about half as much as the entire world of refugees gets, even though there are very few refugees, and the world has tens of millions. Moreover, what they define as refugee are really inhabitants. It's any Palestinian, essentially, is defined almost as a refugee. If you use the UN Refugee Agency's definition of refugee, before the war, there were probably no more than 30 to 40,000 refugees. So there are serious issues about the very existence of this organization beyond its participation in Hamas.
And do you think this situation is bringing these issues adequately to the surface in such that the international community will start reassessing the UN's agencies in total?
I think they'll have to. I think the behavior of the UN overall, whether it's the failure to condemn in a timely fashion the rape of women on October 7th and the atrocities, as well as the behavior of its agencies cooperating and facilitating, if not even outright participating in Hamas activities. By the way, we'll see the same with the World Health Organization. There's going to be stuff there, too, in the hospitals, and the use of WHO staff and hospitals for this, too. So I think this is a real watershed moment in terms of these international organizations, at least in terms of American politics, potentially European politics. And these organizations really cannot function well without American funding, let alone European.
And so you mentioned a lot of the resources that are going into Palestine through the UN. How do you think, into Gaza through the UN? How do you think that it could, these pauses on funding could impact that region?
Well, certainly the Palestinians will have a much more difficult time. I suspect there will be alternative structures that will be set up by Israel, the Saudis, and others.
Are currently blocking 8 highways leading to the capital, but the epicenter of their expected impact is here at the largest fresh food market in the country, in Rungis. However, today, Rungis is not under siege by farmers, but rather by a heavy police and military presence. In an unprecedented move, the Ministry of Interior has deployed dozens of light armored vehicles to secure the area. Trucks are expected to arrive in Rungis by tomorrow. The Interior Minister says he will not allow the blocking of the sector.
So you have understood the major organization set up by the Interior Ministry to prevent the country from being blocked, and particularly the Parisian capital.
The head of one of the major farmer unions said that farmers would continue their action everywhere in France, stating, with the aim to get emergency measures about the core of our business. In the capital, some residents show support for farmers.
It's true that there are a lot of demonstrations, but people can't move till the end of the month, so I understand.
I think the farmers, have been abandoned and left on their own. I think there is no support from the population, yes, a little bit, but not from the government.
On Friday, the government dropped plans to gradually reduce state subsidies on agricultural diesel and announced other steps to reduce the financial and administrative pressures farmers face. However, farmers maintained nationwide protests demanding better pay and living conditions. David Vives, NTD News, Paris.
The EU said one of the suspects was stopped while trying to cross the Ukrainian border. Ukraine's prosecutor general said the stolen funds were seized and would be returned to the defense budget. And Lviv Arsenal told local media that the person responsible for the ammunitions contract has been fired. This scandal comes at a bad time for the Ukrainians. The Biden administration's request for $60 billion more in assistance for Ukraine is stalled in Congress. Some lawmakers, including House Speaker Mike Johnson, are demanding more oversight of U.S. funds.
We need the questions answered about the strategy, about the end game, and about the accountability for the precious treasure of the American people.
Since Russia's invasion, the U.S. has committed at least $44 billion in military assistance to Ukraine. The Ukrainian Security Service said the embezzled money came from state funds, not money from foreign aid.
Hungary is the last NATO country